Hi, Lizzie here. Today I'm going to show you how to make Mindy. And Mindy, just in there, is a fabulous little lunchbox. It really is going to be incredibly useful. Good size, nice handles. It's got a zip going all the way around. Looks very similar to Milan, but it's made up completely differently. Plus it's boxy. It's a definite box shape. Really useful. You could use your thermolam in there, your insulating wadding. I haven't, I've just used regular wadding, so it depends what you're going to use it for, but basically it is a lunchbox. But of course it could be to transport your makeup or your toiletries, that sort of thing. So again, like all of my other patterns, they are usually multi-use and multifunctional. So that's what the pattern looks like when you download it from the website. It shows you we're having a lovely little picnic in the garden, and I'm going to follow the pattern as best I can, but you know what happens with that. I explain every time. I start off with good intentions. So we've got the handles back and front, so you've got a lovely carry case there. I love the fact that I've used the sort of the contrast binding, if you like. Now I have used regular binding. I have not used bias, because having experimented with this, I realised that straight binding, a regular binding you'd use for quilting, let's say, is actually much better. I've tried it with bias. Doesn't really work, so I've tried to go smoothly around the corners, but we've definitely got a rectangle shape, sharp corners. So I decided that perhaps like a quilting binding would be absolutely ideal. It's got a double zip, so just like Milan, I'm afraid it's a double zip again, but incredibly useful for various things. First of all, you can open it right up so you can see right inside there how fabulous it looks. It's all incredibly neat and tidy, no raw edges. It's absolutely super. You can see that the zips go right to the back. The other thing is, if you only use a single zip, I just want to give you a little word of warning. It's quite difficult to do these corners when one end of your zip is open. So, and even with stitching across, it's a little bit more challenging, let's say. And this is, although it looks really simple, it is a challenging project. So I would suggest you start off making a toile, a sort of a sample one. See how you get on, because with this you need to be super accurate. So a double zip I think is essential, because it helps you sewing the lunchbox together, but also I like it that you can always have these double zips at the front, take both round to the side if you want to. Now you could flip your binding and do a machine stitch all the way around, so you've got it really strong. But you know what? I really like hand stitching binding. I know, it's a thing. So I've hand stitched mine, and I've hand stitched it so it's on the top. So obviously I started on this side of the zip. You know, when we get to it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So depends on whether you want it to show on the top or not. It depends how your stitching is, I suppose. Yeah, so it's just a super duper make, really handy. Great for the kids to take to school, great for holidays and beach time, that sort of thing. Yeah, just a great make. I'll give you a little word of warning again. Be careful of your directional fabric, because my poppies are directional, so at the front, don't they look absolutely gorgeous? But because they're directional, at some point they would be upside down. So to save that worry of thinking, which way are they going to go, I've actually done my poppies sideways, so you can see it looks like that. But you know what? When you look at the whole thing, you wouldn't know. So just think about your directional fabric and just enjoy the process. So this is Mindy. I hope you like her. So let's pop her to one side. I never know which side to pop her on. I'll pop her over there. There we go, and I can pick her up when I need to. So if we go onto the overhead, we can look straight away at what things we need. So we've got, let's do this in some sort of order. We've got a double zip here, so you can see how that looks. We've got the sliders coming into the middle. Now what I want you to really notice with this, let's do it so you can see the whole thing, is that the fat end of the zips, I always liken them to frogs. You'll always hear me say that. So if you think about a frog and these two little frogs are meeting nose to nose, then you'll get the zip sliders going in correctly. If you leave your zip on one end and you thread a zip slider on the other end, thinking, you know, saving a bit of time, it'll only work if both sliders are sitting nose to nose. So just be aware of that when you come to put your sliders on. We've covered putting sliders on ever such a lot, and hopefully you'll have looked at some of my other videos and to know how that's done. Really super easy. So that's your zip. Now I've asked you to cut it longer than your width of your fabric because you're going to cut your zip ends to put the sliders on, and then you can trim back. Okay, so that's the reason why they're longer. You've got 2 webbing handles. Now these you can also make in your fabric if you want to. You don't have to have these in webbing. They could just be in your regular fabric, but I quite like webbing. It's very easy to sew as well, so you might as well use it. Then we have the fabric itself, and there's only 2 pieces as such. So this is the long piece that goes around the outside of the box, the lunch box. We just about see it all in shot. And it's, don't forget again about direction. So when you start to put the straps on, this is actually upside down for me because I've already marked where my straps are going to go, my handles. So when you go to mark your handles, don't forget the direction of your fabric. So this is the bottom, that's the top, and that's your one long piece. Now I've already put my stabilizer on here. You can see I've got my stabilizer on, but I've also adhered the lining as well. Okay, so it's one big sandwich of your outer fabric, your wadding, whatever you decide to use. I wouldn't suggest using Bosal for this, the NR form, the foam wadding. I don't think, well, try it, but I just would find that very cumbersome for the actual process of putting this together. So that's your outer piece that goes all the way around the bag. Then we've got the piece that goes from the bottom all the way around the top, and you can see it's just another rectangle. Again, you need to be aware of the bottom of the bag and the top of the bag, so you might want to think about having your direction going sort of this way, because it's only the bottom part that gets fold under that goes upside down. So again, it's just something else to consider. Again, I've marked where my straps are going to go, here and here. Also, it's crucial, now this is really important, it's crucial that you make the marks that I've told you to make in the pattern. So here and here, get your center points. You don't need to worry too much about the bottom, but the top, I would suggest you get the center point there, and also on the sides here. Okay, it's really crucial to get these marks. So this is what we're stitching to every time we stitch a seam. Likewise on the outside piece, the gusset if you like that goes around, again I've marked, that's my center point there, so that will match up to that. Can you see? That's how that works there. And then I've got my marks here, here, here and here, and I've actually snipped into these. I've cut a V, but I've cut an sort of a, what would you call it, inverted V. We can talk about that as we go along. You need to snip all your straight edges. So all of these here have been snipped ready for stitching. So you can do that as you go along, or you can do it now. I suggest you do not snip anything more than 1/8 of an inch, or between 1/8 and 1/4, but don't go anywhere near 1/4 of an inch because of the way this bag is constructed. Okay, so that's your bits there, and then we've got binding. Now there's 2 ways of doing the binding for this lunchbox. You need a piece of binding like you would with bias binding, where you folded it in half and then you fold it again, so you've got what I always refer to as a little tent. So there's your piece opened out, and then you're folding in the long edges to the center, and then you're folding again, and that's for the zip. Okay, that's for installing the zip, and that's the first thing we're going to do. Then you've got your regular binding here, which is I've done it as 2 inches rather than 2.5, and that's folded in half as well. These being your raw edges, I've kept that on there so we can see the sort of inside and outside of the fabric. This is your raw edge, which will always be stitched to the bag. This is your fold, just as you would if you were making a quilt. So we'll keep that to one side. I'll keep it nice and neatly wrapped. Once you've made your binding, it's not a bad thing to wrap it like this, just as it is, or round a cotton reel. It stays in shape then. This is almost like a poly cotton, and it doesn't hold its creases very well at all. So just that's what I do. When it's hot, I just wrap it round and it keeps it nice. So I'm going to put that to one side. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to do the zip. So we're going to attach the zip to that long side outside gusset. So I'm going to use my quilter's tape. I found that to be the easiest thing to do, and I'm going to line the quilter's tape up against the edge of the zip tape, the outside edge. So just move those sliders out of the way and just make sure, I mean, you don't have to use all of this quilter's tape. You could do just little pieces of it, just little sections all the way along. It's just to help you install the zip nice and straight. I love quilter's tape for that. So just press it down, make sure it's all attached, and then just peel it away. And you might want to just use your nail just to make sure that that first bit of glue tape is nicely adhered. Then what you're going to do is you're going to open up your binding, and this is binding where you've got the raw edge, the long raw edges going to the centre, and then you're just going to fold again. It's a good idea to actually press this really well, so this is really crispy. I've used starch on mine just to make sure it really is nice and crispy. And then all you're going to do is line up the edge of your tape here, your edge of your binding, to the edge of your zip tape. There we go. So all the way along. If your binding is any wider than this, then just bring that slightly forward. You don't really want to go near these zip teeth, so you might want to just to sort of bring it forward a little bit. In fact, it's probably easier to keep it straight and just eyeball it all the way along, just to make sure that it's the same width from the fold of your tape to the zip teeth. And I'm just going to lift that up and just reposition that a little bit. So you're actually adhering the back of your binding, okay, and the fold of the binding is what's near the zip teeth. Okay, that's much better. Okay, so if I open this up, you can see that we've got a nice little gap there, which our fabric here, is going to be put into. Okay, so the next stage, use your quilter's tape again. Now you don't have to use all of this quilter's tape, as I said just before, but it is incredibly useful for keeping everything in its place. Kind of, you're telling it who's boss. So I'm putting it on the inside, on that bottom fold. You can see if I open that up, it's the bottom fold, and just all the way along. It doesn't matter too much if it's a bit wriggly, so if you miss the edge, don't worry about that, and just trim it. So again, just make sure you've pushed that tape down so it's nicely adhered, and then what you're going to do, use your thumbnail again, make sure that it's well stuck, and just lift that backing paper off, and there we are. That's what it should look like. You can see the glue quite clearly. Then what we're going to do is get our fabric piece, and we're just going to lay it inside and fold this over onto the front of our design. So just pop it in the center. Try and get it a good sort of 1/4 inch in. I would probably suggest you don't go right up to the fold, because your fabric, your binding, will not fold over very neatly. So just give it a little bit of a gap of let's say minimum 1/16 of an inch, go for perhaps 1/8 of an inch, something like that. And then the binding has got a chance to flip over. Okay, so that's nicely stuck. Give it a finger press, make sure that it is well stuck all the way along there. So make sure your ends are well stuck. And then all you're going to do is get your pins, and you're just going to bring that binding over and just pin it in place. You don't need to go through your zip tape, you just need to go through your fabric really. Now I've got a mark here which I really want to make sure that I can see, so I'm just going to mark it. This is the thing about this, making this bag, is it's quite accurate. You want to be able to see your marks as you're stitching. Okay, so although I've popped a pin there, I didn't need to. It's more about transferring that mark. It's just, you'll find out as we go along that you'll need it. Again, there's the other mark there. It's all in the pattern where these marks are. And I think what I'm going to do is include a little sort of diagram as well, because I think it's important we get this right. I don't want you to be disappointed. So I'm just literally flipping my binding over and just popping a pin in those first couple of layers. And of course, because my binding, let me just bring it over a little bit, just because my binding, my zip are a little bit longer than my front gusset, it allows me to stick that binding down. It makes a really nice neat finish. This end I can do just that wee bit there, and it just holds it in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to stitch along this bottom edge first, and then we'll go along and stitch this edge. If you want this to be super duper accurate, so if you feel that you're a little bit wriggly, maybe do this one first and reposition things as you go along. It's not a bad idea, but I'm just going to go for it and go along here. So we're doing 2 lines of stitching to hold all of these pieces together, all of these layers. It's a really neat way of getting that lovely finish. So let's bring in the machine. Now I've already got my zipper foot on, but I need to change my foot to a walking foot very shortly. So we just start stitching. Now try and keep this as neat as you can. So you're going for about a 1/16 of an inch from the bottom of your binding. Take your pins out as you go, you don't stitch over pins. One day I'll tell you about my accident. I think a lot of people have heard my story, but so as you're coming along, just make sure everything is staying in place. I can see that one bit of my zippers come away, but that's okay. So maybe stitching near the zip first is perhaps a better idea. It's like everything, isn't it? We all come up with ideas after you've made something, and quite right too. So I've done my bottom row of stitching. Now I'm going to do the top row of stitching. So this is the stitching near my zipper teeth. Now if you just happen to have some bias binding, then just be aware that it might well buckle and stretch out of shape. This is why using straight binding is actually much more preferable. And also starching it really helps to keep all those creases and folds in place. So there we are. So there, I love the black on there. So that's our binding and body attached. And if we look at the back, you'll see that we've attached the zip and we've attached the all the fabric layers as well. So that's lovely. We've made a good job of that. Okay, so I'm just going to trim the ends of my zip so it all is lovely and neat. And what you could do is stitch, which I think I will do, stitch across the ends of your, if I do it that way, if you stitch across here to keep your zip teeth together. So about 1/8 of an inch. Make it nice and strong. Let's just give that another go. I've still got my little zipper foot on. It doesn't like going over the zipper teeth. You'd think it would. Right, so keep your ends of your zip nice and square, because I want you to assume now, forget all about the fact that you've got a zip in. Just treat this as a piece of fabric, okay, which is easier said than done. But this is going to be one of your corners, this end of the zip here, so don't neaten it off in any way. Keep it really nice and square. So I'm just going to go and change my foot now to a walking foot, and I'll be back to you in a minute. Okay, so we've installed the zip. I've changed to my walking foot. I strongly suggest you do the same. The next thing we're going to do is actually pop our handles on, our straps. I'm using webbing, as I said before, so all I'm going to do is fold this under 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch if you prefer, and just attach it to my bag. So if we look on the overhead, now you just want to be really think about how these handles are going to go. So the handles are going to go like that, okay. Now I've already put my marks there, so I know that's exactly the middle, that's the middle, and I know there's a measurement in the pattern that tells you exactly. Now these handles go on that measurement. They don't go in the center, they go on that measurement to the side there. Different patterns do different things. Don't worry if this webbing comes undone. If you want to zigzag it, then do that. But I'm not, sometimes you have to think, well, this is just a lunchbox, so we're okay. I'm going to use my heavy pins just to keep that in place. These are the heavier sort of Taylor Seville pins than my regular ones. The regular ones are so gorgeous, but these are a little bit more heavy duty, which are, again, they're fit for purpose. So go through all the webbing, all the layers of my bag, and keep those lovely and straight. Now all I'm going to do is a very small rectangle box across the bottom, making sure I keep everything in place. Use your pokey tool, your stiletto, to poke your raw edges in. Go over the top of my raw edge and come back down. Yep. I would leave that for you to decide how big your box is. In the pattern there is a definite picture on what size it is, so I'll just skip to that so I'm telling you right. Shows you exactly where to place the bag handles. Now the other bag handles you want to attach is on this main part as well. Again, I've given you all the measurements, so you've got the measurements here and here, which are vital. You've got the bottom as well. Now I haven't marked it there, but actually that's not so important. You do need the front one because you're going to match that up to the front of the bag. These 4 here are vital, and this is where you're going to place the handles. Now this is the front, this is the top of the lunchbox. This section here is the top, so you want to be thinking about your handles and which direction they're going to go in. So I'm going to fold this under. I'm going to pop the edge against the edge of my mark. So once again I've made a mark, and I'm going to get my pins. Now I haven't got my correct pins handy, so we'll have to use my fine ones, which are not so good for this. And then this way as well. So I want you to be aware of that, because if you put the handles the other way, they ain't going to sit right. So bear in mind the handles need to face the front. So a bit of a recap. This is the top of the bag. This is the back side of the bag, and this is the bottom part. So this goes right underneath, okay? So we want the handles, when we lift our bag up, to sit like that. I kind of see what I'm doing there. So make sure that your handle is facing the front, this being the front, okay? And mark it. I've got my mark here, so I know that's the front. I know that's the correct measurement, so I know this piece is kind of longer, can you see? So hopefully that's enough information. So what we'll do now is that we'll stitch the bag handles on. Let's bring the machine in. I've got my walking foot on, so I know I'm really good to go. I feel very confident about all my work when I've got my walking foot on. Little back stitch. Go as far as you dare to the edge. Come back up. Now I would do a back stitch again because I like it to be nice and strong. Make sure that when you come to the other end, make sure your raw edges of your tape are well and truly underneath. Right up as far as you dare. In some ways it's better to go one stitch over and then come back. Back on yourself. I'm going to give it a little bit of a back stitch there. So again, love using the walking foot. Don't be afraid of it. It looks like a monster, doesn't it? But in actual fact, it is your absolute best friend. Tuck your raw edge in, so you can't see it. I would go one stitch over, like I said before. Little back stitch, just so it's lovely and strong. And if you want to do the cross hatch in your box, please do. It adds to the strength, but I don't think you're going to carry much in a lunch bag. Gold bullion maybe, definitely do a cross. I think on backpacks it's probably better to do a cross. Gold bullion, hey. Right, so let's do the front of the bag. So we're just doing that nice back stitch just to make sure it's lovely and secure. I'm loving this fabric with the cats. It's one of those things, you're either a cat person or a dog person, aren't you? I'm actually a dog person, but I think some people have both. They're too generalised there. So again, make sure your straps are on the mark. Make sure they sit straight as well. Cut my thread as I go. I'm just going to use my pokey tool again, my stiletto, just to poke that raw edge in. I saw something today about if you've got a knee lift, you should always use it. It was a kind of waggy finger type of post. I think it was on Facebook. And I thought, you know, I think knee lifts are really good, especially when just doing what we did. We needed it to be, we needed to go back and lift up and all that sort of thing. And I've got one, but I always sew at an angle, so it wouldn't work. But use a knee lift if you find it useful. Okay. Little bit of random facts there. So what we're going to do now is attach the side gusset, the side long piece, to the main body of the bag. So if we go on the overhead here, so the first thing we're going to do is actually stitch from there to there. We're going to use, as I said, we're going to use our walking foot. So even though we've got our zip on here, it should be fine. We're not going to go right up to the zip here. We're not at all. We're going to stitch whatever our walking foot will allow us, which is usually a good 1/4 inch. And we're going to start a 1/4 inch away. So if you have a look here, what we can do is put a little mark there. We're going to start a quarter inch away, and we're going to finish a 1/4 inch from the end. Okay, so that's what it should look like. So we're not going right up to the end. We're absolutely not going right up to the end of this piece here. All right, now you could stitch this way round so you can see the corners of your fabric. So what you would do is stop and start on the 1/4 inch point here. Okay, obviously you're going to go right across from point to point, but you don't want to go any further than that. Okay, So this is all about accuracy now, and you want to be following all of these marks, and as we go along you will see what I mean about that. So let's bring the machine in. And I'm going to start exactly where I said, a 1/4 inch in. Like I said, you could flip this over if you want to, so it's easier for you to see. I'm going to remove my pin. And a little back stitch all the way along. And like I said, I'm just going to move my zip sliders. Your walking foot will allow you to get so far. If you want to, put your zip foot back on and do that, but you don't want this seam to be any bigger than a 1/4 inch. Absolute maximum. So taking all my pins out as I go. I've got my 1/4 inch mark, so I know where to stop. Okay, and I'm going to break the thread. So I've stitched the front of my bag, okay, to the top. We're doing wrong sides together, so our raw edge is on the outside of the bag. Now this is where you need to have cut you're going to cut all your straight edges. So where you come to a corner, so on here for instance, where you come to a corner, when we turn, you're not going to cut your corner, you're going to cut your straight. Now if this happens to be zip tape, you're still going to cut it just a little bit to help you get round that corner, because don't forget we are stitching a real sharp rectangle, real sharp 90-degree corners. So I'm just going to cut my tape just a little bit, and then that allows me to bring that around. So I'm going to pop it under the machine where I stopped. All this can be done in one go. I'm just trying to do it so it's easier for you really. Let's just bring my foot control round a little bit. So I've got my needle in, and I'm going to bring my piece that's underneath over to the left and my top piece over to the right, so both straight edges are sitting together. So if we look on the side camera, this is my marker. I want that marker to come up to the corner of my zip here. So there's my marker, there's the corner of my zip, and I'm just going to swivel all this fabric around, and it will go, and you're just going to stitch up the side. And again, you're going to do because you're still stitching the zip, you're stitching about a 1/4 inch. So let's just bring this up. And you're going to stop a 1/4 inch away from that marker there. So you've got that's your marker, and that's where you're going to stop stitching. So once you've stitched one side, we're just going to flip it over and stitch the other side. I found it much better to do it this way than try to do it all in one go. So I need to snip into my straight edge, which is my zip. So I'm just going to snip in just a wee bit, just to allow me to go around the corner, because don't forget we're going around corners still. I'm just going to flip it over. I'm going to put my needle in where I stopped. This time I've flipped it around, so I'm actually stitching on the right side of the fabric of the side piece, the gusset. Just turn that corner, put the needle in, and you're just then going to come down then the other side that you need. Okay, so that is now, if we look at it like this is the front side, the gusset there, these sides here all installed. So we need to now do the side backs and underneath as well. So again, we're just going to slowly make our way around. Now this time the snip is in this part here, so you're going to snip in where your marker is, and you're just going to turn the corner. So let's do that. So I'm going to put my needle back in, up to my marker. I've already snipped mine, so I can just turn this now. and you're just coming around the corner. So don't forget, you're just ignoring the fact that you've got a zip, and just come all the way down and stop. Now, like I say, you don't have to keep stopping like I'm doing. It's just helping me to explain to you how you're building this up. So we've now done the back side seam there. So again, we're just going to get where we put our needle in where we stopped, and we're just going to turn this around. Now again, I've snipped into my long piece here. My long piece. So I've snipped into my long piece. You're never snipping a corner. You're always going to be snipping on the straight edge. So again, I'll just put my needle back where I stopped, and I'm just going to swivel that fabric around. I've already put my snip in just to save a little bit of time, and then I'm coming down again. So again, you're going to stop a 1/4 inch. Again, I'll take it out so we can see what I've done. So I've gone, if I get it the right way around, so I've gone down here, and I've now just gone along the base of my bag here. So now I'm just going to turn that corner again. Again, if you've snipped into it, fantastic. If not, we can do that now. Just make sure it goes around that corner. So I'm just going to pop my needle back in and bring those fabrics together. And just make sure that when you do come along here, that you end up at the marker. So we're now going along the base of the bag. So you stop a 1/4 inch away from the corner. So if we look on the side camera, I'll just show you here. You can see that's where I've stopped. And this happens on every single piece. I'm just going to turn the corner now. So I'm going to pop it back into my machine, put my needle down, got my foot up, and I've already cut into it. So I'm just going to swivel that around. So you're kind of bringing the bottom one to the left and the top layer to the right to get those straight edges to sit together. And then we're coming up to the top. And we might want to open up our, it's not necessary, but just in case you need to have a little bit more space. So a 1/4 inch away from the corner of whichever piece you're stitching. So now we've only got one more seam to do. So it's better to do it in sections like this, because you'll know that you've got the correct shape. You can see already how it's looking. It's just making sure that you use all those markers, and that's why I keep saying about it. Now, because I've got double zip in, it means that the edge I'm coming up to now is secure. The teeth of the zip are obviously lovely together. I've stitched it. If this was a single zip, possibly this is the end where the teeth are not together. And like I said to you before, you've got to treat this just as now as a piece of fabric, which includes the zip. So I want you to ignore the fact that you've got a zip coming up, and just treat the top of the corner of the zip as your piece of fabric. So again, we're going to stop at that 1/4 inch, but we'll have stitched the whole thing up by then. So I'm popping this down onto my machine again, popping my needle in just where I finished stitching, 1/4 inch away from the corner. Okay, so if you always remember, it's 1/4 inch away from that corner. So you don't necessarily need to worry about the straight edges, but just make sure that your markers are in the right position. So let's just bring the piece together here. There we go. So like I said, just make sure that all those raw edges are sitting together nicely. And then this is the last seam. So although I've been taking it in and out of the machine. Like I say, you don't need to do that, but sometimes it's nice to regroup. So now we're just coming up to where we started. So just make sure everything is lined up. Do a little back stitch and snip. Now there we are. So we've got the gist of the bag made. Obviously if we need to zip it up we can. And that's how it looks. So you can see how it looks kind of in the rough state, because obviously we've got to bind it, but by just looking at it like that it looks absolutely square. If you didn't follow those markers, and if you didn't have a walking foot on there, it may well go squiffy. So the key thing of this is follow your markers, follow the corners, keep to that 1/4 inch away from the corner thing. Get yourself a walking foot. It's absolutely essential with this project, and actually good practice, isn't it, to actually use. So now I'm going to go round the whole thing and trim up my seams. I'm just going to make it super neat, ready for putting the binding on. So I might as well just keep you there while I do that. I don't care whether I'm cutting zip or whether I'm cutting fabric. I'm just neating it all up. So you've got quite a lot of sort of separate seams here, quite a lot of layers with your wadding, and this is why I said to you, perhaps like a Bosal in our form foam is maybe going to be a little bit cumbersome. I would just say try it if that's what you want to use. I found it enough with just the wadding, and of course you could use thermolam, all of that sort of stuff. So like I say, just trim it down, take some of that bulk away, give yourself a fighting chance. Makes a lovely, lovely bag, it really does. Just make sure that you know exactly where your corners are, because we need to know that for our binding. And we're really going to put the binding on as if it was a quilt. And like I said, I found that to be the best way. I tried doing it with binding like we did with the zip, but you've got so many corners on this. It wouldn't have been a very easy pattern for you to follow. And we have enough with the accuracy, keeping to the accuracy of it. Okay, let's get all my bits and pieces out of the way. So I think that's pretty well trimmed. So now what we need to do is to actually start putting the binding on. So right at the beginning of the video, I think I remember saying that you want to be aware of where you start putting the binding on, because if we do it like that, say for instance, that's going to be folded over to the front, for instance, and that's where your hand stitching will be. If however you do it the other way, so you're stitching on let's just show you like that way around, it means that the top part of your bag will be stitched and hand stitched underneath. So maybe that's the way you want to do it. Now we're absolutely not going to be doing a 45-degree angle turn. There isn't enough sort of seam length to be able to do that successfully. So we're just going to do a fold at the beginning. So cut your binding nicely. Let's get it so I've got a double piece. And fold your binding in, I would say 1/2 inch. Use quilter's tape if you want to. Like I said before, this fabric is like a poly cotton. It's so bouncy. You know what, I really wouldn't recommend it for binding. So I'm going to use quilter's tape just so it holds it in place. And you're folding that end in by 1/2 inch and fold it back, glue it, and then fold it again. And that's how you're starting off. So if we look on the overhead, so I folded that in. Let's get that out of the way. I folded that in 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch if you want, and then I'm folding it again. So you've got a lovely nice folded part. When we bring our binding back over, we're literally just going, you could, if you wanted to, leave this open. You could start stitching sort of about here, so leave it open so your binding sort of sits inside, but I'm happy just for that to sit on top, and then I fold the whole thing over. I'll let you decide which is the best for you. So now what we're going to do is actually put our binding on. So I'm going to start at the back here, so my join is at the back. So if I bring this in, I'm going to start here, and I'm literally going to do what we would do in quilting, and that's do our 45-degree turn. It's not particularly easy with this because we've got all of these sides, but you can do it. Please persevere. Like I said, this is not, although it seems that it's going to be really easy, it's a little bit more complicated than you would first think. So I'm going to start sewing. So hopefully your sewing will be on your original stitch line. So we're going to come up to each corner and do our 45-degree. So there we go. Just do what you would normally do. Everybody has their own way. I always take mine out of the machine, turn it, fold it, and then come back. And what you've got to do is fold the bag as well. So you're folding that bag, the lunchbox, over as well. So it's quite a lot to remember. But I just want you to do the best you possibly can. So you're doing your 45-degree, plus you're folding the bag. If you want to, if you think it's going to be easier for you, open up the zip. Maybe that's going to be easier for you. Let me try. I'm not sure, because you still got to move the sliders out of the way. Make sure you don't stitch anywhere near them. So let's just get my fabric sorted. So I'm coming along the top edge of my bag now. I've gone right near the slider. Make sure your zipper teeth are tucked out of the way. And what you want to do is just make sure that you stop a 1/4 inch away, just like you would with regular binding. Like I say, keep those zip teeth out of the way. You're going to fold your 45-degree. We've covered this with Morgan, and I think I showed you quite close up. So let's open this piece up, might as well. Keeps everything out of the way. So again, all the way along. Make sure those zipper teeth are tucked under. So you're coming to the other corner now. This is on the top. So this is the top front part. Like I say, keep that zip out of the way. If you feel you're going anywhere near it, do keep checking, because you absolutely don't want to stitch it. Let's keep it out of the way. I think I have. So back stitch. So you're stopping a 1/4 inch away, just like you would if you were binding a quilt. 45-degree again, and then come round the other side. So look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this off, and then I'll come back to you when I've got all of the binding on, and we'll talk about how you've now finished the rest of it off. I'll see you in a minute. So I've stitched my binding on all the way around. You can see what it's going to look like. I haven't folded it over yet, as I actually start to do that. So it's the same with binding. You're just pushing your corners out. Now you might want to give this a press now, press it afterwards. You might have some loose threads. I'll just get my snips. So we can cut those as we go, or when you hand stitch this. Now if you want to, you can machine this. So by now you'll know that all of these corners and all of these edges are quite challenging. I'm not going to deny it. So you may not want to top stitch it. So, I found it better and neater when I hand stitched. So all I'm going to do now is fold these edges over and clip, ready for hand stitching. So we'll just do that now. If you can be successful with your 45-degree angles when you get to your corners, fantastic. You'll have cut down all of your fabric, so it should be a lot easier. So if we look on the overhead, we can see as we're coming to our corners, we're just literally making our 45-degree folding back. It just makes, you can see straight away, it makes a really nice neat finish. So work your way around. If you want to use pins, but there's quite a lot of seams here, quite a lot of edges, and you might well catch your fingers. When I came back to where I started, you can see this is my folded piece here. This is the folded end. This is the end that I tucked in underneath. So I'm going to tuck the end bit first, and then I'm going to bring my folded piece over. When I come to hand stitch that, I'll make sure all of those edges are well and truly tucked in. As we come up to the top here, this is the top side. It's sometimes hard to explain what each section is and which side is. Then we're going to just treat the end of the zip as if it was just a piece of fabric, as I said to you many times before. So fold it, get your 45-degree, bring it back on itself, and get yourself a really nice sharp corner. I mean, that's not brilliant, but when I come to hand stitch it, I can alter that, make sure it's nice and neat. So literally you're just going all the way around. Use quilter's tape if you think that will help you, but you know what, sometimes just keep quilter's tape for the best bits. That's for putting a zip in. So again, with the top there, I'm just folding that over, keeping my zip teeth out of the way, folding it back to make a 45-degree, and because that's going to be underneath, then you're not going to see a lot of that. I've also found if you use binding that's patterned, it covers a multitude. So you know what, follow my lead. Stripes are really good. Stripes make your eyes go squiffy. So if you use stripes, you can get away with all sorts. So again, just make sure that your zip's okay. I'm just having a quick look at that just to make sure I haven't caught it. And if you think you have, just make sure you trim it back and make sure that you can still zip. Let me just move that like that. So we'll just work our way around. Oops. There we go. So just carry on. I mean, clipping is much user friendly than using pins. So I would say stick to your clips, and if you haven't got any quilters clips, do get some. They are good, even though we're not quilting. Just keep those corners as neat as you can, because once you start using it, if you notice your corners are not as good as they might be, then it'll annoy you. Well, it might not annoy you. I would think, oh, I'm going to do that again. So again, just work your way around. Like I said, there's a lot of seams. You'll know by now if you've made one how many seams there are. So just carry on. Nearly done. Okay. Be amazed how many there are. I got lots of clips out. I think I'm going to use practically all of them. So just make sure you tuck your raw edges in. Okay. That's it. Gosh, that doesn't want to go under. That's it. So you can tell there's a little bit of hand stitching to do now. Unless you're brave enough to put it under the machine. Do try it. Prove me wrong. Prove that you can do it. Anyway. One clip left. So that is our bag completely made. And I think Mindy is going to be... It looks like a lady that's left her hair rollers in, doesn't it? But I will go away and hand stitch it now. So if we look at the one that's in the pattern, that's what it looks like. So you can see the potential once I take my clips out and I've hand stitched. And I think it's going to be a great make. So just follow the golden rules with this pattern. Use your markers as the place where you will stop your 1/4 inch. Well, I would say use the corners as your 1/4 inch stop and start place. That way you can't go wrong, but make sure your markers are all lined up and get that walking foot on. It makes a huge difference with this project. You can see how many right angles there are to negotiate, and you want all those pieces to match. So there we are. So there's our lovely Mindy, and I hope you make loads.